I want to start off with explaining my husband, Jake, is an amazing man. We have been together for 8 wonderful years and married nearly 7 of those years. We have struggles, like any couple, but we've done well as a team to overcome anything life has thrown at us. Until now, until this insane situation. Let me back up a bit. About 2 weeks ago, Jake and I came home after going out for dinner. We were both pretty worn out from the day's events and were eager to hop in bed. We went through our regular nightly routine, showering, comfy clothes, teeth brushing, you get it. We hopped in bed, gave each other a goodnight kiss, cut the main light off in our bedroom, and snuggled in the bed to sleep. I turned on my side and looked at the new nightlight Jake had recently bought for me, as I cannot sleep in a totally dark room, and drifted off to sleep. I awoke with a start and was confused. After blinking a few times and letting myself become more focused, I glanced at the alarm clock on my nightstand to see 2:32 a.m. in bold red. I turned over to face towards Jake and immediately froze. Jake was laying flat on his back, arms laying perfectly still by his sides, but his head was turned towards me. He had blank expression, but his eyes were wide open, staring directly into my soul. I literally stopped breathing. I just stared back into his wide, unblinking eyes for several seconds before reality sank back into my brain, and I realized something had to be horribly wrong. I immediately looked at his chest and could see he was breathing. "Jake? Honey, are you okay?" I said, as I reached to touch him. His body felt ice cold, and this sent me further spiraling. I sat straight up in the bed and quickly moved to hover over him. His head slightly turned while his eyes followed me, still wide and unblinking. I grabbed both of his cold shoulders and start to shake him. "Jake, please, wake up, wake up!" No response, just his eyes boring into my soul. Tears ran down my face as I turned to reach for my phone. I grabbed my phone off the nightstand and started dial 911 with shaky fingers. Before I could hit send, I heard the sound of snoring. I turned to look back at my husband. I felt myself freeze again for a different reason. Jake's eyes were now closed. His face was more relaxed, and his lips were slightly parted, resting peacefully. I dropped my phone on the bed and climbed over to touch him again, and he felt warm. I sat in disbelief for several minutes, just staring at him as he slept soundly. Eventually, I put my phone back on the nightstand and laid back down. I turned on my side away from him and pulled the covers over my head. Somehow, I drifted off to sleep, despite still feeling terrified. The next morning, I awoke to the smell of bacon frying and Jake's side of the bed empty. The previous night's events seemed more like a vivid nightmare at this point. I slid out of bed and headed into the kitchen. Jake smiled when he saw me. "Good morning, beautiful," he said sweetly, while plating a few strips of bacon beside a pile of scrambled eggs. "Morning," I greeted him back as he brought my breakfast and a cup of coffee over to me. "Sleep well?" he asked as he moved to grab his own plate before sitting beside me at the bar. Not really," I quietly admitted. Jake looked at me puzzled. "What's wrong? Why didn't you sleep good?" "You recall looking, glaring at me last night?" Jake looked even more confused. "No, why would I do that?" "I don't know, but it was so creepy. You even felt ice cold. You wouldn't wake up and I almost called an ambulance." Jake dropped his fork and got up from his seat. He wrapped his arms around me and hugged me tight. "I'm sorry, sweetie, that sounds awful. It was probably some weird night terror. I doubt it happens again, though. You still love me?" I hugged him back as I snuggled into him. Always. The next few days went by without incident. The weird staring experience had faded from my brain. I woke with a start. Why? I didn't know. My eyes darted around the room before setting on the alarm clock. 2:32 a.m. I slowly turned to look at Jake and let out a yelp. He was sitting straight up in bed, but his head was turned towards me, blank expression with eyes wide open, so wide that it didn't seem humanly possible. I slowly crawled towards him while whispering his name. No reaction. I gently reached out to touch his shoulder. ice cold again. I stared into his big, unblinking eyes. I don't know what came over me, but before I realized what I was doing, I slapped him across the face using every bit of strength I could muster. It was like slapping a solid rock, cold and unmoving. He didn't respond at all. I was frozen as I watched him slowly lay down, eyes never blinking or breaking from mine. I turned away to reach for my phone again, only to hear the sound of him snoring. I jerked my head to see him, once again, sound asleep, eyes closed, face relaxed. I snatched my phone off the nightstand and headed out of the room to the couch in our den. I switched on the light and grabbed the blanket off the couch. I snuggled under the blanket as I laid on the semi-comfortable cushions. I searched up night terrors, trying my best to convince myself that was all it was. No matter what I read, I could not bring myself to go back into the bedroom with him. I woke with a start again. This time, sunlight filled the room. My eyes finally settled on the concerned-looking face of Jake. "What are you doing out here?" "You did it again. This time you were sitting up. You barely looked human. You're scaring me, Jake," I blurted out as my eyes filled with tears. Jake's face softened as he reached for me, pulling me into a warm embrace. I was almost scared to touch him. He apologized again, said he needed to hurry into work but promised he'd call the doctor. We agreed a sleep study may help. I calmed down and walked out on the porch to see him off. The best the doctor could do was an appointment in the next week. I dreaded nightfall and almost didn't sleep in bed with him, but he begged me to try again. A couple more nights passed without incident. I started to relax once more. Then tonight happened. I woke up with blurry vision at first, very confused at what I was seeing. After blinking a couple of times, I felt a scream leave my throat. Jake was not laying down beside me or even sitting up. He was standing beside my side of the bed, leaned over me, just inches from my face. His eyes wide, unblinking and bulging. The absolute worst had I seen. His expression was blank, but he didn't look like him anymore. His skin was nearly gray and aged, mouth stretched too long in a firm line, cheeks sunken in, and those horrific eyes burning into my soul. My mind went blank. I was paralyzed with fear. Then his stretched lips twitched in the strangest way. Then came the voice.
"I see you."
It wasn't Jake's voice. It was too deep, too rough, and too aged. Finally, my adrenaline kicked in. I slid over and rolled away from him and off his side of the bed. I ran out of the room as fast as I could, still feeling those awful, large, and bulging eyes on me. I grabbed my car keys and ran out of the house. The car could not start fast enough. As it roared to life, I gunned it out of the driveway and down the road. Tears ran down my face as I sped away from the house and those haunting eyes. The memories washed over me. I screamed and cried as all the visions I had worked so hard to block from my mind came flooding back. I had heard that voice before. That night, Jake begged me to stay home, but a few friends were going bar hopping and I refused to stay behind. I had an alcohol problem and it was becoming more and more of an issue. I promised Jake I'd only have a beer or two, kissed him goodbye, and was on my way. Next thing I know, it's after 2 a.m. and I was behind the wheel of my car, drunk. I was taking the curves too fast. The radio was off, but I was singing at the top of my lungs when a figure in the road appeared. My brain was not registering or reacting quick enough. By the time I hit the brake, it was too late. I hit the figure, hard. The car skidded to a halt, and the figure lay in the center of the road, several feet away from the vehicle. I stared at my radio screen before jumping out of the car. 2:32 a.m. I ran to see what it was. I felt suddenly sober as I pleaded for it to be a deer. It wasn't. It was an elderly man, eyes wide open and bulging, looking up at me. It was not good. He was badly injured. Gore covered the scene. I heard his voice, deep and rough.
"Help! I see you!"
I panicked. If I called this in, I'd lose everything. Everything being Jake and what we had built. I'd go to jail, possibly for life. I looked around at my surroundings, mostly woods, a few houses farther down the road. completely darken. No lights, no people, no witnesses. Surely another vehicle would come along and help. There was no guarantees he'd make it regardless. I looked back down at my victim. "I'm sorry," I whimpered. I ran back to my car and put it in drive. I swerved around him and bounded down the road. I pulled in the driveway and ran into the house. Jake was sound asleep. I stood under the hot water in the shower, reassuring myself no one saw and someone else would help. I was half right. It was on the news the next day, and while no one saw, it was a couple of hours before someone else came along. It was too late then. The elderly gentleman had dementia and wandered out of his house while his granddaughter slept, wandered into the road, and met his horrible fate at my hands due to my foolish decisions. Somehow, I convinced myself he never would have made it. No point in me ruining my life. I blocked the horrible event from my brain and swore off alcohol. Life went on and things were normal, better than normal even. I did not realize the first night I encountered my husband staring at me was the 1-year anniversary of the accident. It all makes sense now. Whether the ghost of the old man really possessed Jake, or if this a byproduct of a guilty subconscious makes no difference. He is haunting me. I'm writing this confession from my hotel room. I left my laptop in the car the day before. Lucky me, huh? To Jake, I'm so sorry I hurt you. To the elderly gentleman, I am so sorry for what I did to you. I planned to turn myself in. I feared jail, but now I fear the haunting more. May this break this curse. Never drink and drive. Prison, it's different than jail. I know firsthand now. Dirty and cold. Same could be said for the food and even for most of the others locked away here. But I kept my word. I turned myself in thinking it would end this. How foolish of me. I need to back up to fully explain. As I said previously, I called and turned myself in days ago. Or as weeks ago. Time doesn't seem to exist here. The cops walking me out of the hotel was so surreal. I was first booked into the local jail, then moved to the state prison some days later to await trial. I actually tried calling Jake after being moved here. I don't know why I expected him to take the call or why I felt so much pain when he didn't. Surely the cops had paid him a visit, told him of my horrible confession. I've seen it myself that it was plastered all over the news. The horrid girl who killed a local dementia-ridden elderly man in drunken hit and run, driven mad by images of the man possessing her husband. Some speculated Jake knew and helped keep my awful crime hush-hush. He has every right to never want to speak or see me again. Still, when the time came a few days ago that one of the guards told me I had a visitor, my heart jumped with joy at the thought it was Jake. They cuffed me and walked me to a hall lined with chairs and thick plexiglass. My heart jumped for a different reason when they sat me down in front of a woman. I immediately recognized her. I had seen her on the news when the accident first happened. She was crying and pleading for the person who did this to come forward. She was the granddaughter that stayed with my victim the night he was killed, the night I killed him. I stared into her harsh blue eyes before reaching for the phone with shaky fingers. Words eluded me at first as I pressed the phone to my ear. "Hello?" "Don't," she cut me off. "I don't want you to talk. I want you to listen." I snapped my mouth shut and slowly nodded, still locked in her bitter gaze. "I want you to know who you killed. My grandfather, his name was Emery. He loved fishing and camping. He lit up when his dog, Rex, wanted to play fetch. He had 2 children, 5 grandchildren, and 2 great-grandchildren. Twins boys he never got to meet because of you." She spat the last word out like it was poison. Tears streamed down my face. "Do you know what the doctor said?" she continued. "They could have saved him had you just called for help and not left him to die like a rodent." I was starting to tremble as I sobbed. She leaned in as close as she could to the glass without touching it. Her gaze somehow became even more laced with hate. "He's coming for you, little girl. I asked for vengeance, and he is coming." She whispered the words. She slammed the phone on the receiver, stood up, and stormed away. I cried as the guards led me back to my cell, her last words echoing in my brain. Later that night, I was curled up on the top bunk, shaking from either crying or the cold, maybe both. At some point, I must have drifted off to sleep. I woke up with a jolt. It took a moment for my eyes to adjust to the darkened cell. When my eyes did focus, I froze. My cellmate was standing up facing me, eyes wide open and unblinking, face flat with a blank expression. I watched as her head tilted to the right, slowly touching her shoulder. Then came the sickening sound of bone and muscle snapping as she continued to move, head past her shoulder. Her head suddenly stopped, once completely upside down, chin pointed towards the ceiling, and gray, straggly hair hanging towards the floor, eyes still wide open, glaring up at me. I finally broke from my horrified trance and screamed. I covered my face with my hands. After a moment of silence, I pulled my hands from my face and slowly opened my eyes. Nothing. No cellmate standing with her head hanging from her broken neck. I slowly leaned down and looked to the lower bunk. My cellmate was fast asleep. I could hear her steady breathing. I flopped back down on my bunk. Just a dream, it's not real, I whispered to myself. The night guards hadn't come. Surely they would have heard me scream. Yes, it was just my messed up head again. I turned to face the cement wall.
He's coming for you,
whispered in the back of my mind as I drifted off to sleep again. The next couple of days passed as normal as they could in this place, especially as a loner. I even avoided my cellmate more than usual. Then I was in my cell alone a few evenings ago. I stared down into the water that had formed in the sink. Stupid thing hardly drained. I looked at what could see of my reflection, wondering if I looked as lifeless as I felt, when I noticed something. There was a shape behind me, like a figure looking over my shoulder. I leaned down slightly to get a better look when I heard it.
I see you,
whispered in a rough male voice right into my ear. I jumped and turned around, eyes darting around the empty cell. Chills covered my body. It's not real, I closed my eyes and repeated over and over to myself, the granddaughter's warning still bouncing around my brain. Then tonight happened. I had once again fallen asleep crying, thoughts of Jake haunting my dreams when I woke up. There was heavy pressure on top of me, pushing and holding me down on my bunk. As my eyes opened and focused, a scream caught in my throat. One of the night guards I was familiar with was on top of me, eyes glaring down at me, expression blank at first. I then watched in terror as his eyes widened, bulging out of his head, face morphing into that of an old man I recognized all too well. Blood poured from his inhuman and large eyes, nose and mouth. His horrible face twisted into a look of absolute rage.
I see you!
He screamed so loud that my ears began to ring. I felt the blood splattering over my face as he yelled again.
I see you, I see you!
I began to scream and fight, trying hard to move, kick, punch, anything. You're not real, you're not real, you're not real! I cried out as I fought to get the thing off me. Next thing I knew, I was being dragged off my bunk and handcuffed. I continued to scream as I was dragged out of my cell and down the hall. I came to later to see a different environment around me. I was in a hospital bed. I could hear the voice of a woman. She has gone completely insane. They found her screaming and beating herself up. She's covered in self-inflicted bruises and scratches. She even pulled clumps of her own hair out. I couldn't move much, but I could see the woman off to the side talking to a guard. I noticed she was wearing scrubs. I looked down at myself to see cuts and bruises covering my arms. I tried to lift my arms and felt pain immediately. I realized she was talking about me. I must be in the infirmary. I had hurt myself. The two walked off without noticing I was awake. I noticed a cell phone on a nearby table. Can she even have that in here? I don't know, nor do I care. I fought through the stiffness and pain to grab it, to type this out, to tell the grand finale to my sad story. I finally understand why he keeps saying, I see you. He doesn't want to see me anymore. Not alive, at least. I won't make it to trial. I'll die in this prison. Maybe in this very bed tonight. Turning myself in wasn't enough. Accountability wasn't enough. I can only hope to find peace in death, maybe in another time, in another life. I can only hope it includes Jake somehow. The nurse is here now. She's glaring at me, those awful wide eyes, but now a wicked grin with them. Congratulations, dear granddaughter. Your vengeance is served.